someone who is out there in the world, and he's wanting very much to impress his friend with the good news of the presence of Jesus. These words then come from Luke 2nd chapter, verses 4 through 7. All right. The lighting is poor here. Here we go. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descendant from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver the child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no room in the inn for them. Now, during this Lenten season, I want to share with you some insight from my point of view into who this Jesus is, who, as we move through Lent, we discover that he will be rejected and that even his disciples will run away from him and he will die. At the end of this Lenten season, we celebrate the resurrection of this Jesus. Jesus was born into a turbulent world, by the way. In 68 BC, the Roman general Pompey conquered Jerusalem and all of Judea. He was oppressive in his behavior toward the Jewish community, went into the temple, sacked it, and they had to hide. The place for God was stored in this very special site. In 40 BC, Herod was declared king of the Jews. And remember that. In 40 BC, Herod was declared king of the Jews by the Roman Senate. The presence of the Roman army and its suppression of any hopes of their freedom weighed heavily upon the people of Israel. Over the biblical history of the people of Abraham who started back there in the middle of what is now Iraq, and it is the Fertile Crescent and the Tigris and Euphrates River, an incredibly fertile place. Abraham is called by his message from God that indeed he should leave his home, leave his family, leave his work, and journey on to establish a new nation, and its people will be as multiplied as the sands on the shore of the sea. Well over 60 wars during the course of that history were fought by the Israeli people, a number of them ending in victory. Perhaps the most memorable example is the victory of the young shepherd boy David, who with his slingshot is able to not only ward off animals that would do damage to the sheep he was herding, but also then destroyed the temple of Goliath. That victory was a powerful victory and began to establish the presence of an awareness of this great young man who is truly blessed by God. Significant battles also resulted in defeat, and it was clear that the people of Israel were being defeated, as the prophets understood, as a result of their lack of faith and their lack of responding to the very sacred covenant that had been established by God with the people of Israel. Those were powerfully hurtful and damaging and destructive defeats. They first were defeated by the Assyrians. They were defeated by them in 720 BC. The Babylonians then defeated them in 568 BC. And again, the Romans defeated them in 68 BC, led by that Roman general by the name of Pompey. He abolished the Jewish monarchy, by the way, at the same time, so there was no succession of heirs. They were all either killed or sent into exile. And he appointed the high priest of the temple. So even the religious activity of the Jewish community was not independent. They were indeed under the thumb of the Roman government. In 40 BC, the Roman Senate named Herod king of the Jews. Herod became king of the Jews. The priests, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees of the temple were given limited power as long as they kept the people under control. At the same time, there was a tension within the Jewish religion, within the Jewish community. The Samaritan Jews were questioning key practices and theological positions held by the Orthodox religion of Judaism. That conflict became fairly evident as Jesus paid attention to those who were from the Samaritan community. And in fact, the Samaritans oftentimes came back to Jesus with their pleasure and their pleas, their words of thankfulness that they had been given attention by this new rabbi, this teacher, this healer. Following the deaths of King David and Solomon, the development of a leader to make the nation great again began to evolve through the prophets as they listened to the messages from God that a Messiah, a new king, would come and bring freedom and political salvation and power again and reestablish the nation of Israel as a great nation indeed. A Messiah began to take foothold in the thinking of the people of Israel. In the process of this thinking, there were those persons who would step forward and say, I am the Messiah, but oftentimes they either disappeared because they couldn't get a following, or in fact they were killed by the people of Israel because they were considered to be heretics in their teachings. It is into this setting that Jesus was born. Into this setting that Jesus was born. Now, one could raise the question of why that setting? Why not a setting during the great plagues that took place in Europe when millions of people died? Wars were going on constantly for 30, 40 years. Why not during the Second World War when the Jews and others are being assassinated, killed, and sacrificed in gas chambers and medical experiments by the Nazi government? Why not then bring Jesus? But it was identified very clearly by those who wrote the gospel account that the time was right. The time was right for Jesus to be born, to bring a message of wholeness, of life, of health, and of joy, and to establish a sense that he was a different kind of Messiah, that his Messiahship was not for the kingdom of Israel, though they could be surely included, but they were going to hear him say, the kingdom of God is the kingdom that is like the kingdom that will be in heaven. It will be established by our God. So Jesus is born, and into that comes an interesting experience. Jesus is born to a family. He's like any other child who's born even yet today. Not all families are happy to have a child, but I suspect that even though Joseph was a little concerned about the messages he was hearing, that somehow he was not involved in that process, that perhaps he had to bow out of the experience of being married to Mary. But he stayed, and there was a family for Jesus to support him, to nurture him, and to guide him and direct him. So participation in activity within the training of a young boy to become knowledgeable of the scriptures and to become more aware that his spirit and God's spirit could become more deeply connected and become one. There are a couple of references in the New Testament, particularly the gospel accounts, to Jesus having siblings, brothers and sisters. The story of Jesus' birth in Luke says that Jesus was the firstborn son of Mary. The phrase that is used that comes out of the ancient Greek terms for the birth of a person who is the second, third, or fourth in the birth process is that it refers to from the same womb. So in talking about these four brothers that Jesus had and two sisters, it is identified is that they were coming from the same woman. These were his brothers and his sisters. You may recall that at one point the family, we believe that Joseph was older, may well have died, but Mary and the brothers come to Jesus because they're hearing messages that are beginning to paint him as perhaps losing his mind. And so they come to him to have an intervention. We call that an intervention day when we go to someone who's struggling either financially or emotionally or is having difficulty with alcohol, drug use. And so families will come together sometimes and have an intervention, showing love and compassion and concern on behalf of a child that's part of that very special family. They came to have an intervention with Jesus. Jesus had nothing to do with that. He said, "Who is my mother? Who is my brother?" But the world, mother, brother, all of you are my brothers, my mothers, and implied by that also my sisters. The gentle way in which Jesus was treated, even though he may have brought a concern on the part of his parents, a trip to Jerusalem found him in the temple after the parents had left thinking he was with relatives, but he wasn't. He was not with them. They had gone a day's travel, discovered he was not there. I would imagine quite anxious and concerned that they needed to go back to see if they could find him, and found him there in the temple. From every indication, Jesus developed a trade as a carpenter, as a woodworker. The family was likely, probably upper, lower class in economic wealth in that time and that age. So Jesus came out of a small place in Nazareth and Bethlehem where who would have believed that anyone could come of any importance from those two communities. The message was quite clear. This Jesus was someone who was going to have to prove himself. At some point, he said, not even a person who is coming from his own community is listened to by those who live in that community. We know you, Jesus. You are the son of Joseph and Mary. You have 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and you're out there and bringing a message of salvation. We don't believe you. So it was very true that Jesus found a welcome beyond his community, beyond even his birthplace. Jesus was a human being. He was born, as in giving birth, like every other person, and the brothers and sisters that he had were also part of his family. The interesting thing about Matthew is that he is wanting to give a genealogical study of the existence of Jesus as part of the David clan, David family. This great person who had risen to kingship in Israel was a mighty soldier, a mighty leader, and the desire that another person come in that line, in that lineage, in that part of genealogy. So Matthew spells that out very clearly. And then he interestingly says that he is the son of Joseph. In the King James Version, the term is begat or begot, begotten of the Lord, begotten of. And so what Matthew does is he takes Jesus' ancestry all the way back to Abraham, and then traces Abraham, who gave birth to, who next person gave birth to, next person gave birth to, all the way down then to the time when indeed he is identified as a descendant of not only Abraham, but of David. The interesting thing, for me at least, is that Abraham was not a Jew. Abraham was a Gentile. He came from the land of Ur, came from the Fertile Crescent in what is now Iraq, in Iran area, that whole area around just that lower corner that added a great wisdom and great insight into the history of religion. What we know about Abraham, or Abram, is that he was told by God, inspired by God, to leave, and he never became a Jew until he was in his late 90s, at which time he was circumcised, which was an act of entry into the Jewish community, and it was like our confirmation. So Jesus has ancestry into the stranger, into the other, who was part of the world in which he lived. It's important to recognize that the confusion around who Jesus was, I think, not only existed in his life, but oftentimes exists yet today. Those of us who have found great joy in watching the opera Jesus Christ Superstar will recall Mary Magdalene in that movie, or in that play or opera, singing the song, I don't know how to love him. I don't know how to take him. I'm different. I'm new. I'm not the person I was before. It's the kind of thing that we hear from people who say when they're dating someone, oh, I'm so delighted to meet her or to him. I'm different. I'm new. I'm so in love. And so Mary Magdalene is doing this song, expressing her struggle to understand, I don't know how to relate to him, because she, at one level, loves him as a man, and on another level has discovered him as one who can bring new joy, new life, and new hope to her and to the world around her. Josephus, by the way, also was confused by the presence of Jesus. Josephus was a Jewish historian who was born just about the same time Jesus was, so he was a contemporary of Jesus. And he wrote an extensive history of the history of Judaism. And in one of the books that he wrote, he indicated that there is a man, if we can call him that, questioning whether he was just man or whether somehow there was something unique and different of him. He is someone who is clearly, he says about him, he records Jesus as a wise man, a worker of amazing deeds, a popular teacher, and was condemned to die by Pilate and the people of Israel, who said, "Give us a criminal, not Jesus." And to the cross he went. Jesus, the man who was rumored to be a prophet, like Elijah, he was rumored to be John the Baptist coming back to life. So Jesus said to the disciples, "Who do you say I am?" And they said, "Well, people say that you are Elijah, come back to life. Or people say you are John the Baptist, come back to life." And then Jesus says to Peter, who had been confused on a number of occasions, who after his death denies his existence and even runs away with the rest of the disciples, he says to Peter, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah, you are the Christ." The Greek word for Christ is translated into the scriptural reading of Messiah. So it is Jesus, the Messiah. Now, we don't know for sure how Peter understood Jesus to be the Messiah, whether he's to come back as the one who will reestablish Israel to its great prominence and its great power, or whether he understands him as a Messiah who comes to bring salvation to all people, both through his teachings, as well as through his acts of love and gentleness, as well as through his death, and reported through the scriptures, his resurrection. This is Jesus, whom we will meet all through the Lenten season. And it is someone who has said to us, "I want to be a part of you. I want to be in you. I want my spirit to rest with your spirit. So learn more about me, both as a man and as a gift from God." Amen.